many societies, we are predominantly youth-focused, and we tend to overlook the healthcare and policy needs of our elders. This ageist perspective often leads to cultural scripts that prevent us from listening better to alleviate pain and increase reasons for living, and ultimately help us all live well into our golden years. Here are some recommendations for managing suicide risk in older patients. Express concern about suicide ideation to the patient. Obtain consent to contact the primary care physician to facilitate care coordination. This is essential because the vast majority of older adults who die by suicide are seen by primary care physicians in the weeks and months before their death. So having the physician as follows suicide risk assessment is an important prevention strategy. Involve the family in risk assessment and crisis management, especially for older adults with some cognitive impairment. Urge that patient and or family by removing the means for suicide or increasing barriers to their use, such as storing a weapon without ammunition. I want you to create a safety plan to provide emergency numbers, including 1-800-273-TALK. Also, consult colleagues or supervisors who has advanced training in geropsychology. It's just as important for an older person with symptoms of depression to seek treatment as it is for somebody younger. The impact of depression in health in older adults can be severe, and much research has been reported that depression is associated with worse health in people with conditions like heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. Depression can complicate the treatment of these conditions, including making it more difficult to someone to care for him or herself and to seek treatment when needed. Older adults' depression may be disregarded as frailty, or it may be viewed as an inevitable result of life-changing chronic illness and disability. The signs in seeing a healthcare practitioner is the first step to getting treatment, which can make a real difference in someone's quality of living. Warning signs, noticeable changes in mood, energy levels, appetite, feeling flat, or having trouble feeling positive emotions. Difficulty sleeping or sleeping too much, difficulty concentrating, feeling restless or on edge, increased worry, or feeling stressed. Anger, irritability, aggressiveness, ongoing headaches, digestive issues, or pain, a need for alcohol or drugs, sadness or hopelessness, suicidal thoughts, feeling flat or having trouble feeling positive emotions, engaging in high-risk activities, obsessive thinking or compulsive behavior, thoughts or behaviors that interfere with work, family, or social life and interactiveness, unusual thinking or behaviors that concern other people. The Institute of Aging's 24-hour toll-free friendship line, 1-800-971-0016, is the only accredited crisis line in the country for people 60 years and older. And adults living with disabilities, they also make ongoing outreach calls to lonely older adults, while there are other organizations that respond to the needs of people who may be contemplating suicide. The phone provides the type of services that IOA's Friendship Line offers to respond to the public health problem of suicide among the elderly. Knowing that older people do not contact traditional suicide prevention centers on a regular basis, even if they are considering suicide, the Institute of Aging created the only program nationwide that reaches out to lonely, depressed, isolated, frail, or suicidal older adults, and their trained volunteers specialize in offering a caring ear and having a friendly conversation with depressed older adults, providing emotional support. We know that elder abuse reporting is a part of their program. They do well-being checks, grief support through assistance and reassurance, active suicide intervention information, and referrals for isolated older adults and adults living with disabilities. In addition to receiving incoming calls, the Friendship Line also offers outreach to eligible callers. We connect with people on a regular basis and help monitor their physical and mental health concerns, says the IOA. The Call-Out Services Act as an intervention to prevent suicide in the long term by improving the quality of life, connectedness of isolated callers as well. Any aging adult or person living with disabilities who suffers from depression, loneliness, isolation, anxiousness, or maybe thinking about death and suicide can benefit from completely confidential phone calls with the Friendship Line and their volunteers. Sometimes the road to happiness begins by simply saying hello to someone who cares? Today, we know that age and physical health issues put the elderly at risk for COVID-19. But emotional health and mental health are also important risk factors. When mental illness is left untreated, it also puts a person at risk for health complications. I think as a society, we think our parents and grandparents just grow up, old, and senile. We take for granted that there could perhaps be some triggers or factors that are going on that are causing them to be in pain. Reaching out to older adults daily is very important during this time of isolation. Calls, texting, even online video calls help tremendously. Anytime an older person is having long-lasting or lingered mood changes, it is cause for concern and so important to reach out for help. 1 in 5 senior citizens is affected by mental illness, most often depression. We need to treat older adults for mental illness, stabilize their moods, and reestablish a baseline so that they can continue to have good and great quality of life. The date was September 25th of the year 2000. I was 19 and I believed I had to die. On that date, I made the greatest mistake of my entire life. I went out to the Golden Gate Bridge and I jumped off. It was a miracle that I survived. I'll never forget the bus ride to the bridge. I sat in the very back row in the middle seat, looking out upon over 100 people that boarded that bus, and I began to cry, softly, and then moderately, and then waterfalls flowing from my eyes and mucus dripping from my nose. I believed I was useless. I felt I had no value. I thought I was my family's greatest burden. Little did I know that on all 3 of those accounts, I was terribly wrong. My family loved me. My friends valued and cared for me. Hell, my acquaintances would have been there to rip me from the rail of that bridge to safety had they known where I was and what I was doing. As the bus moved along toward the Golden Gate Bridge, all I wanted, hoped, and wished for was one person to see my pain, say something kind like, "Hey buddy, are you okay? Brother, is something wrong?" Or, "Pal, can I help you?" Had anyone said one of those things or even a variation of the 3, I would have told them everything and begged them to save me. The bus got to the Golden Gate Bridge parking lot. 100 plus people deboarded right there with their fanny packs and their foreign accents and their cameras your kids wouldn't understand because there weren't yet phones. I sat there on that bus crying like a child, hoping the driver would notice me and say something positive. He turned to me, he stood, and he said, "Come on, kid, get off the bus. I gotta go." I walked right up to that man. I looked him right in his eyes, and he motioned for me to get off the bus. I walked down those 2 steps that felt like 2,000. I walked across the 2-mile stretch of walkway that is the Golden Gate Bridge for 40 minutes crying like a child. I picked a particular light rail. I leaned my body over that rail, crying my tears to the waters below. And that's when it happened. A woman from my left approached me. She had blonde curly hair and giant sunglasses. And I thought to myself as she smiled at me, this is it. This woman is going to save me. She's going to ask me if I'm okay. I don't have to do this. I don't have to die today. Instead, she pulled out a digital camera and she said, "Will you take my picture?" It broke my heart. I took her picture several times. She walked away. At that moment, I said to myself, absolutely no one cares, which was the furthest thing from the truth. Everybody cared. Nobody knew where I was or what I was doing. How could they stop me? I walked back toward the traffic railing. I heard the voice in my head echo, "Jump now," and I did. I ran forward and I catapulted my hands over that rail. There was no cord to be talked back to safety. I was on no ledge to be given a second chance. I was in the midst of free fall. But that's not the important part of this story. The important part is that at the millisecond that my hands left that rail and my legs cleared it, I had an instantaneous regret for my actions and the 100% recognition that I had just made the greatest mistake of my life, and it was too late. As I fell 220 feet, 25 stories, nearing 95 miles per hour, the speed of terminal velocity, these were the thoughts that rang true in my mind. What have I just done? I don't want to die. God, please save me. I hit the water. The impact reverberated through my legs into my lower back, and it immediately shattered my T12, L1, and L2 lower vertebrae into shards. On that day, during that attempt, I missed severing my spinal cord by 2 millimeters. 2 millimeters. I went down in the water 70 feet and I opened my eyes. I was alive and I was drowning. Do you know it never once occurred to me before jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge into a giant body of water that I might drown? That just goes to show you the irrational and illogical nature that is suicide. I swam as fast as my arms would take me, as I could not feel my legs, although I believed they were working. I swam as fast as my arms would take me to the surface, 70 feet in one breath. As I got closer and closer to the lit circle of water above me, I didn't think I was going to make it. I thought, this is where I go. I started to convulse. I thought, I'm running out of air. This is my end. I remember thinking to myself, Kevin, you can't die here. If you die here, Kevin, no one will ever know you didn't want to. No one will ever know you knew you made a mistake. I broke the surface of the water. I bobbed up and down in it, and I did the one thing I've had control over since kindergarten. I prayed. God, please save me. I don't want to die. God, please save me. I don't want to die. I made a mistake. On repeat, and he heard me that day. A woman driving by in a red car at the moment of my attempt saw me go over the rail, and she called her friend in the United States Coast Guard. The singular reason the Coast Guard boat arrived to my position in the water before I would set in hypothermia and drown in those frigid waters in the bay, which was in between a 3-minute window, was because of that woman's phone call. In the water before the Coast Guard boat arrived, I was drowning. I couldn't stay above the water. I kept going down. On the last time I went down, I thought to myself, this is it. There's nothing I can do. There's no one coming to save me. I'm going to die here and I don't want to. And that's when something began to circle beneath me. Something very large and very slimy and very, very alive. And I remember thinking to myself, you've got to be kidding me. I didn't die jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge and a shark is going to devour me. But it turned out it was no shark at all. As a matter of fact, I was on a television program a year later promoting a suicide prevention campaign in San Francisco. And I said on the show, I thought there was a shark beneath me in the water. People wrote into the show from all over the world when it went viral online before viral was cool. One man's letter stuck out above all the rest. He was a man from Nevada, and he was on the bridge that day with his mother. And he wrote to ABC News, and they sent it to me. And his letter said this: Kevin, I'm so very glad you're alive. I was standing less than 2 feet away from you when you jumped. Until this day, no one would tell me whether you lived or died. It's haunted me until now. By the way, Kevin, there was no shark, like you mentioned, you thought there was on the show. But there was, in fact, a sea lion. The sea lion kept me afloat until the Coast Guard boat arrived behind me. When the Coast Guard boat arrived, officers pulled me onto their flatboard. They put a neck brace around my neck. They strapped me in from head to toe, and they started asking questions. Hey, kid, do you know what you just did? Was the first question they asked. And I remember how pathetic my answer was. Yeah, I just jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. And they said, why? And I had no reasonable answer. I said, I don't know. I thought I had to die today. The senior officer on the boat said, son, do you understand how many people we pull out of these waters that are already gone? And I said, no, sir, and I don't want to know. He said, I'm going to tell you anyway. He said, young man, this unit alone has pulled 26 dead bodies from these waters and 1 live one. That gave me a great deal of perspective. As a matter of fact, in 84 years, over 3,000 people have jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. Less than 2% have survived, roughly 39 people. 26 or so remain alive today. Many have died of natural causes or old age. Of those that remain alive, 19 have come forward like I did to say the exact same thing I did, that it was an instantaneous regret from their actions. Why? I believe it's because they finally recognized in the moment of their attempt that their thoughts did not have to become their actions. Think about that for just a moment. Our thoughts don't have to become our actions. If all of our thoughts became our actions, how many of you would be in jail for road rage right now or something else? If we can recognize in the moment of suicidal crisis that our thoughts don't have to own, rule, or define what we do next, we can always remain here. We can be here tomorrow and every day after that. The Coast Guard got me to the ambulance, and the ambulance got me to the hospital where the next part of the miracle occurred. One of the foremost back surgeons on the West Coast happened to be there that day and opted to do my surgery. He invented it for my situation, the first and only of its particular kind, saving me the ability to stand, walk, and run. Of the 39 Golden Gate Bridge jump survivors, only 5 of us get the privilege to stand, walk, and run. They call us the most exclusive survivors club on the planet. There's a book of the same name by Ben Sherwood. I'm making a point. I get to be here. And getting to be here is a privilege and a gift, no matter the pain we can be in. It wasn't easy after this. It wasn't all sunshine, magical, and rainbows, and I didn't just get better right away. I would have 9 psych ward stays in the next 14 years for suicidal crisis. I live with chronic thoughts of ending my life. They plague me, but they'll never take me because of that newfound perspective that I hold, that my thoughts don't ever have to become my actions when I'm suicidal. When I'm suicidal, I turn to the first person next to me and I say 4 simple but effective words. I need help now. And if the first person I turn to can't help me, I turn to the next, and then the next, and then the next, until someone is willing to empathize with my pain and help keep me safe on that moment, on that day. I have lived 20 years with suicidal ideations by saying those 4 effective words, and you can too. It would be in my 3rd of 9 psych ward stays, the 3rd involuntary stay, while the rest of the 6 after that were voluntary. I walked in of my own volition, where the first 3 were against my will. It was the 3rd psych ward stay that my uncle came to visit me, my Uncle George. And he said, Kevin, do you want to be in and out of these places for the rest of your life? And I said, no, Uncle George. He said, well, get it together, kid. We're counting on you. And he left with me a Time magazine article, How to Fight Bipolar Disorder, Depression, Mental Illness with Routine and Regimen and Win. I thought it was a bunch of nonsense. I took it in my psych ward bedroom and I read the article through and through twice. And then I put words into actions. I was pre-diabetic and well overweight. I lost the weight in the hospital in that 2-month period I was there. I started to eat properly. I went to a nutritionist and asked them for better food options, and I started to lose the weight. I was exercising every day in the hospital bedroom, using every service I could to get the work in and get my body to the ground and get to work. I went to the case manager and I asked her if she could help me with my insomnia. They offered me more medication. I said, well, no, I'm taking the medication you're prescribing me with 100% accuracy every day, at the same time every day. Give me something natural for my sleep. They gave me whale, ocean, rainforest, noises, and music, and a CD player to play it on so I could fall asleep easier at night. I played it on a 20-minute sleep timer right before I would go to bed. I thought, this is a bunch of nonsense. This isn't going to work. I haven't slept in months. I was asleep within 2 weeks. Everything in that magazine I began to do. And I could see a rapid improvement in my mental, mind, brain, behavioral, spiritual, and physical well-being. So what did I do after I came out of the hospital? I developed what I call the art of wellness, a 10-step guide to better mental well-being, all through the vestige of hard work. I recognized my mistakes and my flaws, and I put to work the effort of using a routine to balance my brain. I found a better sleeping pattern and circadian rhythm. I exercised every day. I ate non-inflammatory foods. I used coping strategies that would better my brain health. I refrained from drugs and alcohol. I did everything I could, including advocate for myself, educate myself and my family. All of this became a part of my 10-step plan, which I'm going to share with you right now. Friends, this is the art of wellness. What you're about to see is what I call the art of wellness, a 10-step guide to better brain, mind, behavior, mental, physical, spiritual health, and well-being. Check it out. A lot of people have been asking me, what do I do to stay mentally, physically, and emotionally healthy and well while living with an extreme form of bipolar disorder? Well, let's get right into it. What's cracking, Hope Nation? It's your friendly neighborhood Kevin Hines, and this is another round of Ask Kev, where you, from the interwebs of the world, across all social media platforms, ask me questions and I answer them to the best of my ability. I have been getting question after question about what is my general routine to stay stable. But people have been asking me all over social media, Kevin, how do you stay mentally stable while living with such a severe form of bipolar disorder, type 1 with psychotic features? Well, I'll tell you first of all, it's not easy. I work tirelessly for my better brain health. And during COVID, it's been even harder. But let me break down in this video the 10 steps I utilize to stay tip-top to the best of my ability. Let's get right into it. Number 1, therapy. Therapy is a key go-to for me. Now, I recognize that not everybody can access therapy. Not everyone can afford therapy. But therapy means what it means to you in your particular situation and your life's path. If you go ahead and you educate yourself as to music therapy and art therapy, something you can get books on and teach yourself, meditation therapy, you can be better mentally well. So therapy is different for every person. For me personally, I utilize talk therapy, art therapy, music therapy, blue wave light box technology therapy, and breathing therapy or breathwork therapy. Talk therapy is when you talk to a therapist. Now, because of COVID, it's virtual. It's teletherapy rather, and I do that with my teletherapist on a regular basis. I have her on my Zoom calls or on my FaceTime or on Facebook phone call even. That's right, my therapist answers Facebook phone calls. And so I make sure I can see her, she can see me, the expression on my face, my demeanor, my overall well-being, she can tell right away because we worked together for so long. Let's talk about music therapy. Music therapy is amazing. It helps me sleep at night. I listen to music therapy 20 minutes before I go to bed. I used to be an insomniac. This helped change my life. Art therapy. Growing up, I sketched as a kid all my life. I sketched, I drew, mostly superheroes, some real life stuff, some backgrounds, some landscapes, but I really fell in love with it. And when I am feeling in a bad place, I get down, I get a sketch pad out, and I put pen or pencil to paper, and I get to work, and it makes me feel better because it's a release of pain. Now, when I'm doing breath work therapy, that's resonance breathing. I'm inhaling 4 seconds through my nose, holding for 4 seconds, then exhaling 8 seconds through my lips, like pursed lips, like a whistle, but no sound. I do that 30 times in the morning before I do anything else, before I check my social medias, before I even turn on my phone, before I do anything. I am breathing and getting my mind and body to a calm so I can just cool off and know that this next day is beginning. I do breath work in the morning, in the afternoon before lunch, and right before dinner. I do them because it helps me stay to a cool, collected, and calm place. Resonance breathing does a few things. It lowers your heart rate, lowers your blood pressure. Don't do it if you already have low blood pressure. That's a key thing you must know. Disclaimer. It lowers your blood sugar. Yes, breath therapy lowers your blood sugar. So if you're tackling that right now and you're dealing with blood sugar issues, breathing can be a key way to help you balance your life. It also quells an adrenaline rush, panic attack, and anxiety attack. I do all of these things with breath therapy, and it's amazing. So let's go. We got therapy. That's the first step in my 10-step plan. Let's talk about the 3 E's right there. 3 E's. Education, exercise, and eating healthily, or proper nutrition rather. Eating proper nutrition is so crucial to your better brain health. Now, I will be blatantly honest with you. COVID hit me hard. I was put on a new medication. It decreased all the leptin in my body, making me feel ravenously hungry all the time. And I have gained quite a bit of weight during COVID, but as they say, who hasn't? I'm working it off right now. I'm working really, really hard to stabilize. You saw me sit down with my hoodie on, the sweat on my brow. I just got done with my 3rd workout of the day. And you might think, well, Kevin, that's excessive, but don't worry about it. It's not. I did a 23-minute light exercise this morning on the upper body. I did a 23-minute lower body exercise this afternoon. And I did a 20-minute full body exercise, 23-minute full body exercise this evening. I do that all hours before I go to sleep so I get a great night's sleep. It really helps me out. Triple workout day just because I felt like it and I needed it today. It really helped me out. Helped me feel more mentally stable. Sanity over vanity. So yeah, I've gained some weight, but I'm getting back into shape and I'm getting back on track with my physical routine. But let's get back into the program. Therapy. Education, exercise, eating healthily. I exercise every day and have done so for the last 4 weeks. It's been something that has really kept me stable and feeling good and feeling energized and feeling mentally conscious and aware. I feel like I can get through the day a lot better when I exercise first thing in the morning and then again in the afternoon pre-lunch and then again in the evening pre-dinner. It really is something that helps shape my day. And let's talk about why. 23 minutes of rigorous exercise leads to 12 hours of better mood. And if you're taking care of your mood, you're taking care of your brain health, your brain well-being. 23 minutes, 12 hours of better mood. That's the category. But 23 minutes twice a day, 24 hours of better mood, 3 times a day, you do the math. So that's exercise. Let's talk about eating healthily. Now, during these COVID months, I went a little haywire and I was eating myself out of house and home with everything I could find and not necessarily the most healthy things, but I'm back on track with a good, clean, healthy diet. And let's be clear. Healthy is different for different people. And I want to be crystal clear that I'm eating foods that are non-inflammatory once again, that don't inflame my system, that don't cause me puffiness in my face and bloat around the gut. Obviously, you can see that some of the remnants of that is still going on, but I'm working that out right now. So it's been really good getting back on a clean, nutritious diet. Next to that, let's talk about education. This is one of my favorites. Educating yourself and your family member about what you're going through. So I read every single bit of information I can find on bipolar disorder as soon as it comes out. Every bit of information on bipolar disorder that I can find through a Google alert on bipolar disorder, suicide prevention, mental health and well-being, wellness. I read it all, I devour it whole, and I take it, and if it's reputable and proven, I add it into my routine. That's where the music therapy came in, and the art therapy came in, and the resonance breathing therapy came in, and even the blue wave light box technology therapy came in. All those things came from me reading research papers and studies and things like that, and articles and the like, and blogs about how to stabilize mentally. Just educate yourself as much as you can, especially if you've been diagnosed with a mental illness. So next to that, educating your family, your friends, your confidants, your colleagues about what you're going through. How can they be aware of what you're dealing with if you don't help them understand it first? So instead of being angry at people that don't get you, maybe give them a book like Loving Someone with Bipolar Disorder by Julie A. Fast, or giving them a book like Bipolar for Dummies by Candida Fink and Joe Cranack. I got to be in their third edition of that book, and I was so thankful to do so. So definitely check that book out if you have bipolar disorder. I'm a Catholic. I have a Bible, but Bipolar for Dummies is my second Bible. I use it every day. It helps me stay stable. It helps me to understand myself and my inner turmoils and how my inner struggles and how I can defeat them one day at a time. Don't let your pain defeat you. Let it build you brick by brick from the ground up. Succeed beyond the pain. Thrive in spite of, despite of the pain. You can do this. I believe in you. Those are the 3 E's. Exercise, eating healthy, education. So therapy, exercise, eating healthy, education. That's 4. Let's talk about 5. Coping strategies and mechanisms. Finding things in your life and your existence that help you help yourself heal. So things like grounding techniques and finding tools and really hobbies for yourself that are positive. Reduction of the negative aspects of your life, reducing the negative people in your life. Those are all coping strategies you can utilize. So that's therapy, education, exercise, eating healthy, coping mechanisms and strategies. Let's talk about refraining from drugs and alcohol. I don't use drugs. I don't drink any alcohol. I used to binge drink on the weekends until blackout. I did it a handful of times. I didn't do it every weekend, but I did it a handful of times. I got alcohol poisoning, and at 21 years of age, I got so drunk and I embarrassed myself so bad that I never touched alcohol again. I have not had alcohol since my 21st birthday. I'm very proud of that. I quit cold turkey. It was very hard. I don't recommend that way to do it for anybody, but drugs and alcohol, I know they're not easy to shake. I know substance use disorder is very real. I know that both my biological parents died of mental illness, but they died of drugs and alcohol as I'm adopted. And I know that people are torn up inside and they want to get healthy and they want to get help, but they're struggling with their addictions. I wish you all the best. I'm sending out my love, my good vibes to you. Please work tirelessly to defeat your addiction. You can do this. I believe in you. I know you got this. My birth parents sadly didn't make it. Let that be a lesson to you. You can survive the pain, get through it, and you can reduce the drugs and alcohol in your system to nil, and you can find programs and treatments that help you to defeat your addiction. I believe in you. So therapy, education, exercise, eating healthily, coping mechanisms and strategies, refraining from drugs and alcohol. That's 6 of the 10 steps. Let's get into it. Advocacy. Advocating for yourself and advocating for public policy or legislative advocacy. Self-advocacy looks like being honest about your pain, telling your truth to others, telling your therapist the truth instead of lying. You can't get forward in therapy unless you tell the truth. Lying in therapy only gets you down a dark path. So being honest in therapy is key of any kind. Advocating for yourself in the sense that if medications you happen to be put on are making you feel uneasy, tell the truth about that so you can get to different meds. Meds don't work well for everyone. I take meds that work well for me. I'm lucky that I found those meds. I'm lucky that they work well. I'm lucky I got to a better place because of them. But that's just a piece of the puzzle. This entire 10-step program is really everything that works together at the same time. Advocating for myself in therapy sessions, with doctors. I've had so many primary care physicians and physical doctors of all kinds tell me that I'm psychosomatic. And if you don't know what that means, it means they're blaming my fear of physical illness on my mental state. And they're saying that I'm basically fictitiously making up in my head. I remember vividly when I went into a pulmonary specialist's office and told him I was having a really hard time breathing, he told the doctor next door that I was psychosomatic and that it was all in my head. Turned out that I had some issues with my lungs that were very serious, and he didn't even take it seriously. So you have to deal with these things and that shame and that stigma and that discrimination and that marginalization because you have a diagnosis of mental illness. It really sucks. I've had many of those situations occur, actually. I was once having a grand mal seizure, and they said it was psychosomatic, which it wasn't. It was a devastating seizure that caused a great deal of pain to my system. Nonetheless, we move forward. So that's self-advocacy. Let's talk about legislative advocacy. Let me give you a prime example of legislative advocacy. My father, after the film The Bridge came out, if you haven't seen the film The Bridge by Eric Steele, check that out. The Bridge is about the deaths on the Golden Gate Bridge in 2006. And Eric Steele made this film about why there's no rail up on the bridge right now and why it hasn't happened. My father was so inspired by this, he founded the Bridge Rail Foundation with Dave Hull and Paul Muller. Dave Hull lost his daughter to the Golden Gate Bridge, tragically. Dave, thank you for being such a servant to this country and the world and doing the work you do. And Paul Muller, thank you for your efforts and your hard work in changing the situation and making sure that we never stop fighting for this net to be raised at the Golden Gate Bridge. And thank you to my dad, Pat Hines, for pushing forth the fight. And thank you to Alexis Durat St. James for being the original funder for the Bridge Rail Foundation. You are an amazing human being and a gift to this world. And so the Bridge Rail Foundation fought for the better part of 14 to 16 years, including myself doing this work in legislative advocacy, to raise the net at the Golden Gate Bridge. Well, guess what? It's going up right now. It's being built and it will be done by 2023. And as of 2023, not one more beautiful soul will ever again be lost to the Golden Gate Bridge, and it will become the largest and brightest beacon for suicide prevention around the world. It's amazing. So exciting. That's legislative advocacy. That's where you get a small group of like-minded people that make great change and can change the world. Let's move on. So we've got therapy, education, exercise, eating healthily, coping strategies and mechanisms. We've got refraining from drugs and alcohol. We've got advocacy. The next step I want to tell you about is meditation. Now, we all heard that meditation can benefit us and help keep us more mentally stable. Meditation is so crucial for the body to live in a present state of mind. Being here with you right now is the only place I want to be. I'm with you, you're looking at me, I'm looking at you through this lens, and it's like I can see into your soul. And I know some of you are going through a hard time. I want you to find meditation, the kind that works for you. Do your research. Transcendental meditation is great. There's a great many meditations that can work for you. I find that tm.org is one of the best resources for meditation that works for a lot of people around the world. I met Bob Roth, one of the founding members of Transcendental Meditation, a genius in his own right. He's a great man, a man I call friend, and I find that meditation helps you recognize your true value by recognizing your inner peace and finding a way to stay calm in the face of all this manic world that we live in. This world is filled with mania. It's filled with disruption. It's filled with too many influences, and it's filled, frankly, with too much stimulation. And sometimes you need to bring that all to a calm. And that's where that resonance breathing comes into play with the meditation alongside it. The Calm app is a wonderful app for meditation, so check that out. Not a sponsored post, by the way. Just love that app. And Headspace as well. Two great apps for meditation. I want to give you guys those resources because they're out there and they're meant to help you. And if you need someone to talk to and you're able to afford a therapist, BetterHelp is a great place for talk therapy. So is Talkspace. We don't want to discriminate. We want to collaborate, not compete. Let's let everything help everybody. How about that? So meditation. Let's talk about medication. That's my next step. Medication. Medication, as I said earlier, is not for everybody. It works really well for me, but it took me a long time to find the right kind for me. And when I say a long time, I mean one hell of a long time. It took me a long time to find the right meds for me, but I did, and I have, and I feel so much better with them now. The medication I take with 100% accuracy each and every day without fail, and I take it at the same time every day without fail, because it helps stabilize my system and keep me safe from myself. When or if I become suicidal, I can take a PRN to make me calm down. All these things are very helpful. A PRN is like a rapid release medication that helps you in the moment of a panic attack or a stress attack or even a suicidal state of mind. So next to that, let's get right into step 10, the final step of the 10-step plan, the art of wellness. It's called the plan, your mental health emergency plan. Everybody has mental health, and thus everybody has to take care of it. And if you're not, you're doing yourself a disservice. So get right to it and get to work and build your plan. Your plan is basically, for me, it was a binder back in the day. A binder I handed to my 5 closest family members and friends, and they became my personal peer protectors, my personal protectors, as I call them. And they were the people that had my plan. They knew my doctor's information. They had a release form signed. HIPAA laws were usurped, meaning that they could talk to my doctor and ask them anything about my treatment, and my doctor had to tell them everything about my treatment to make sure I was physically safe. If I couldn't keep myself safe, they could keep me safe through the plan. They had my doctor's name, number, email, address, everything, and vice versa. And anytime I wasn't able to take care of myself, then these people came forward, and guided me to a safe place. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a quick version of The Art of Wellness, my 10-step guide to better brain health. I wanted to help you find hope. I wanted to help you find healing. And I wanted to help you be well and be here tomorrow and every single day after that. Be well, be kind, compassionate, loving, caring, empathetic, and non-judgmental to every single person you come into contact with, no matter their behavior toward you, because you never know what they're going through. You never know what they've been through. And be good to yourself. You belong here. You deserve this life into your natural end. Suicide is never the solution to your problem. It is the problem. I believe in you. This life is the greatest gift we've ever been given or will ever be given. Guys, be well and be here tomorrow. Heidi Bryan has battled with depression most of her life. She is a suicide attempt survivor and a loss survivor, having lost her brother to suicide, as well as her uncle and her cousin. In 1999, she founded Feeling Blue's Suicide Prevention Council, now Prevent Suicide PA. She has served on the board of directors of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and as the vice chairman of the board of directors for the SPAN USA. Heidi is a passionate advocate for age-friendly health systems and communities, especially more providers with specialties in working with elders. Meet the amazing, the incomparable, and the wonderful Heidi Bryan.
About a year ago, 13 months ago, one of my closest friends called and told me her father died by suicide. And he was 87 years old. And I had a volunteer once who said, I know older adult suicide's a problem and it's awful, but the younger people, to me, it's worse because they have their whole life to live. And to me, I think we should focus on youth suicide prevention. And I understood what she was saying, but I felt like saying, if you've lost someone to suicide, if you've lost your father to suicide, and I had an uncle who was 90 and killed himself, talk to my cousins, talk to my girlfriend, talk to other people, it's still death by suicide. There's still a lot of guilt. There's still a lot of anger. There's still trauma attached to that. So I think we forget that part about it, that there's still family members left behind who are grieving and struggling with this. Talking with you, I was thinking that, part of my problem with getting older is that I never saw myself as getting older. For the longest time, I always thought I wouldn't live past 40. I just never envisioned myself getting old. Never. Even as I was aging, I just never did. So I never thought about things you should do to help protect yourself when you get old. Like if you start exercising earlier in your life, you'll keep it up and you're more likely to continue doing it as you age. That's a big plus. Things like that. I just wasn't prepared for getting old. And, your memory starts to go. You can't remember things as well. Your mind isn't as sharp as it once was. Your body certainly isn't. It takes you longer to recover from exercise. You start to have this aches and pains. And for me, I just kept thinking, okay, I'm at the peak. It's just going to be downhill from here. It's just all going to go downhill. Each day I wake up, it's just going to keep going downhill. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And I just started to get into that dark thinking and just like, there was just nothing good about it. It was just all bad. It got to the point where, because I told my husband I would never kill myself while he was alive also, I got to the point where I was sitting on the edge of the bed and I was thinking that I was going to ask my husband, I was just going to say to Bill, let me go. Just let me go. I can't do it anymore. Just let me go. And he walked in and he saw, and he's like, what's going on? And I can talk to him about my suicidality, thank God. And I said, I know you don't seem to have a problem with getting old, but I do. And he's like, what makes you think I don't have a problem with it? And I said, because you never talk about it. And he's 9 years older than me. So I felt like I couldn't talk to him about it, which was just my perception, not his. And he's like, no, I'm not wild about it. It's not real great. And I said, oh, okay. And so then he and I started to kind of, how can we joke about it? So we talked about, like, if we get up in the morning and we have a pain, is this a pain we got to go to the doctor to, or is this just your normal old age, it's roaming through my body pain and things like that? And so that helped me. I was talking to Jerry Reed, and he said how he looked at his hands and the age spots and the wrinkles, and he saw that as experience, not as age spots or wrinkles. And that hit me, and I thought, I have to start reframing my thinking here. I have to start looking at it as I can still contribute. I'm still a valuable member of society. I still have, I'm not dead yet, and I can do things to increase my mobility or whatever, or still enjoy life. You have to adjust your expectations. And through it all, what amazes me is that it enabled me to become gentler with myself and more forgiving. And I just don't expect as much of myself. And so, yeah, it's hard, and I'll always probably struggle with suicidality, but since those times, it's gotten a whole lot better. I also got a part-time job. I got more involved in, the community. I got friends and things like that, which also helped, which I think, again, with older adults, you tend to become isolated and you tend not to go out as much. I try to keep my thinking flexible, which I think with a lot of older adults, you tend to get more rigid and stuck in your thinking. Like, I was able to reframe things, but I think a lot of people, older adults, aren't able to do that.
Hi, I'm Margaret Hines. Older adults make up 12% of the US population, but account for 18% of all suicide deaths. This is an alarming statistic, as the elderly are the fastest growing segment of the population, making the issue of later life suicide a major public health priority. Aging is not just a biological process. It's also very much a cultural one. Different cultures have different attitudes and practices around aging and death, and these cultural perspectives can have a huge effect on our experience of getting older. While many cultures celebrate the aging process and venerate their elders, in Western cultures, where youth is fetishized and the elderly are commonly removed from the community and relegated to hospitals and nursing homes, aging can become a shameful experience. Physical signs of human aging tend to be regarded with distaste, and aging is often depicted in a negative light in popular culture, if it is even depicted at all. There's so much shame in our culture around aging and death. Koshin Palin Ellison, who's a Buddhist monk and co-founder of the New York Zen Center for Contemplative Care, told the Huffington Post, quote, "People themselves, when they're aging, feel that there's something wrong with them and that they're losing value." Psychologist Erik Erikson argued that the Western fear of aging keeps us from living full lives. I think we all need to work harder to change that.
If I go to AA or wherever, and I say that I just celebrated, in November, I celebrated 32 years of sobriety. It's like, I'm an old timer, and that's like, oh, wow, how'd you do it? And that's great. But everywhere else, you're not looked at as, oh, wow, you have such experience, you're an old timer. How did you do it? That's great. I think we don't value older adults as much in this culture as others, or as much as we could, sir. I think that there's belief that it's, older, of course, older adults are depressed. Wouldn't you be? That it's almost like a common thing that as you get older, you're going to have depression, and you don't, it doesn't have to be that way. I think we always assume that it should be, almost should be, you're getting old, of course you're depressed. That depression's part of aging. That's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't have to be that way. We can do things to help people with depression, and it might be medication. It could be their medication is contributing to depression. We can help them to have a life that is not depressive. If you become either disabled or you're more likely to get a diagnosis of diabetes or heart disease or Parkinson's, even, all these things tend to show up in your older adult age. That's hard to deal with. Will it shorten your life? How am I going to cope with that? It just suddenly, that's another factor. And you think, well, God, now is this what, am I going to be sick all the time? Is it just going to get worse? How can I live in the moment and not project into the future? How can I not worry about what it's going to be like later down the road? Because who knows, maybe they'll have even better medication or whatever. My husband had a heart attack and was like 2 steps away from getting a heart transplant. And initially the prognosis was not good. And he's, what is it, like almost 20 years later, and he's doing well. He's going strong. He could have looked at that and thought, oh, well, I'm going to die soon. I'm not going to live to an old life. So why take care of myself? Why bother? Why not? He didn't. He was like, okay, what can I do to improve my life? What can I do to stay alive? What can I do to help myself live longer and stronger? Yeah, my husband's great. And I had my husband, and I don't mean, but one person isn't enough. You can't, and you shouldn't rely on just one person. That's putting a lot on him. If I keep going to him with everything, it's just, for me, I need different people of all ages in my life. That makes my life enjoyable. I like learning from all sorts of different people. I like interacting with all sorts of different people. And so that's huge. I think, like you said, you call your dad every day and tell him you love him. Something like that, to just tell them how much you value them. Convince them that there still is life worth living. There's still interactions. There's still, love and friendship. There's still things to learn, things to explore, movies to see, anything like that. And if you can only just do it one day at a time too. Just for today, what can we do? And what can you learn? Where can you go? Who can you see? That kind of thing. How can we engage you in life again? And it is hard when you're in pain and have, a diagnosis. It is hard, but we are resilient, and we do learn to live with pain, and we do learn, to cope. But especially if we can just cope, focus on the moment and today. I just want to say one thing that this woman, Hickma Gardner, who is an advocate for older adults in Pennsylvania, once said that, when we lose an older adult, we don't lose just a person, we lose a library. And I think that's the other thing too, is if we can talk to them about their life experiences, about their genealogy. There's so many times that I wish I could ask my mom or dad a question, whether it's about family or if it's about, like, my mom was from Germany and I want to make this German dish, and I'm like, I wish I could ask her how she did it, or things like that. Ask them now, start, which is, I guess, part of value them, share their lives. I think too, that lets them know their life is important if you want to learn more about them.
For almost 10 weeks now, we've been checking and tracking the spread of COVID-19, and without a doubt, there is one particular age group that it picks out more than any other. And we have found out and discovered that what makes this age group more susceptible, not just physical problems, there are other problems too, and that's what the Gowns tonight is all about.
Open and not have.
At every governor's press conference, you hear it. The 65 and older age group is the most susceptible. And while the virus is bad enough, what makes it worse? Emotional instability.
If there are signs and symptoms of some type of mental illness that are left untreated, that certainly puts a person at risk for health complications.
Stephen Simmons is Community Education Coordinator of the Senior Behavioral Health Unit at CHI St. Vincent.
I think as a society, we think our mamas and daddies or grandparents, they just grow old and senile, and we take for granted that there could perhaps be some triggers or factors that are going on that are causing them to suffer.
1 in 5 senior citizens you see is affected by mental illness, most often depression. It's why CHI St. Vincent has set up a whole unit to fight it.
We take those persons onto the unit, and our goal is to stabilize their mood and to reestablish a baseline so that they can continue to have a good quality of life.
But the isolation caused by the virus is a challenge to all families. It's why Simmons says reaching out to senior citizens daily is so important. Calls, texting, and if they're tech savvy, Zoom calls or something like it.
Anything to where the deficits aren't greater than what's presented now with the self-isolation and quarantine.
And of course, we all have older relatives who can get moody, but
when they start to have lingering and lasting effects, I certainly think that that's cause for concern, and it's certainly imperative to reach out for some help.
And with a disease as unrelenting as COVID-19, you need every ally you can get.
By the year 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be a senior citizen. And as baby boomers age, many will eventually enter long-term care. That move brings difficult choices and challenges for both seniors and their families. Among the less discussed is an increased risk of both depression and suicide for those moving into or living in long-term care. Special correspondent Kat Wise reports on this difficult topic. It's part of a partnership with Kaiser Health News and a warning. This story contains graphic references to suicide.
He was fit and physically just on track to just living this long, long life.
Roland Tiedemann was a lifelong outdoorsman, a hiker, skier, and a member of the Forest Service who taught his daughter, Jane Davis, to love the outdoors as well. But after so many years of pushing himself, traveling the world, and serving as a surrogate father to his granddaughter, Jana, after her father died, both his health and his wife's began to fail in 2014. He contracted a vicious case of shingles. His wife, Mary, took a fall while caring for him, breaking her back. She was subsequently diagnosed with dementia.
So we made the decision to put them both together in a facility where, in my opinion, I thought that would be the safest place, that they would get the care they needed.
How did he handle the transition into a long-term care facility?
Good question. He didn't. He struggled with it, but he also recognized it was the only option. I didn't have the space. I built a place with no bedrooms on the bottom floor. Neither of them could do stairs. He had his hands tied. And for a man that had made so many decisions and been able to be so free, now he was confined to this space where he didn't have a voice.
In early 2018, facing his third move to another long-term care facility, one that would accept Medicaid as the family's resources dwindled, the 89-year-old locked his door at his nursing home in Wenatchee, Washington, and jumped to his death from his 4th-floor window.
Him being a big writer, I knew he wouldn't have left without a note, and a note was found. And he couldn't write. Remember, he had shaky letters, and it just said, "Sorry, everybody."
It must have been so difficult. It's been about a year since he passed. How are you doing now?
Every day, a different journey. I miss him. He was my anchor, and he was my daughter's anchor. When Jana's dad died, he became her papa, and she misses him.
Davis lived close to the nursing home and found it painful to drive by, so she and her daughter recently moved to Colorado. But in the wake of her father's death, a new program is being developed to prevent this from happening again.
So vision loss leads to social isolation, which then concurs into depression.
Julie Rickard is a psychologist at Parkside Mental Health in Wenatchee, a 28-bed crisis stabilization center.
So other unrecognized suicidal issues.
She's also the founder of the Suicide Prevention Coalition of North Central Washington, which she started in 2012 after a rash of suicides, mostly among young people.
Prior to that, we kind of averaged between 10 and 13 any given year, but as long as a youth didn't die, the community wasn't saying anything about it.
Then in 2018, Roland Tiedemann's death led her to start asking questions at his facility of the residents, staff, and administrators.
What I heard was that there were other residents that were now considering the same method, and the administration really wasn't on board. Like, they had no idea because the staff hadn't communicated to administration that there were these other 5 residents that were now considering the same method. And what they had said was, you know, I always wondered if that would work, but now I know. The risk is elevated for up to 8 months after transitioning to a long-term care facility.
Sitting in on Dr. Rickard's staff training was Kaiser Health News reporter Jonelle Alicia. For the past 6 months, she and her reporting partner, Melissa Bailey, have been examining records of over 500 attempted and completed suicides from across the country in long-term care settings. And she was surprised to find that the rates of suicide among residents in these facilities don't differ from seniors living on their own.
One of the things that I think most people think is that when you send your loved one to a long-term care facility, in part what you want is supervision. And from the data that had been available, it looked like the rates of suicide in long-term care and in the larger community with no monitoring were about the same.
Is it your sense from your reporting that this is an issue that is front and center for many long-term care facilities? Or, I mean, are they really tracking the mental well-being of their residents?
You know, we found that it's a pretty big problem. From the research that we did, up to a third of the people who are living in long-term care centers had suicidal behavior, either suicidal thoughts or attempts. And we found that about half of the people have been reported to be depressed.
Had a home, a new car, and now I ain't got nothing.
A year and a half ago, 84-year-old Jim Ellis moved from a facility in Arizona to Katy Glen, a 60-bed long-term care facility in East Wenatchee. He'd already lost his leg to a medical complication and says losing his mobility and independence have been hard. He says other residents feel the same way.
Has anyone here that you know ever talked about or said that they're thinking about trying suicide?
You hear it practically every day.
You hear other residents talking about...
Certainly. And I've probably said it myself. But, yeah, it's talk.
When can we do the patient health questionnaire for...
Julie Rickard is working with management at Katy Glen, which hasn't had a suicide, to try to prevent one from happening.
What does that exactly look like?
By screening residents for depression and suicidal thoughts, teaching staff to recognize warning signs, and then intervening when necessary.
Some families watching this might start to feel a bit guilty for having their loved ones go into long-term care facilities. What would you say to them?
I would say, you know, there's lots of reasons that people go into long-term care. This isn't about whether it's a right decision or a wrong decision. What it's about is, what are we doing on the backside to make sure that the person's transitioning well when they are going into long-term care, that we are doing the things to support them and stay connected.
A big part of that means pairing people who are not adjusting well with those who are, to help them reconnect and re-engage with the community. For Jane Davis, that mentoring piece is key.
I think the biggest thing is connection. If you have no connection, if your voice is no longer heard, why? What's the why for life? And just having someone to listen to you, to tell your story to. My dad had a great story. He loved to tell him, but no one was listening anymore.
But for many families, evaluating long-term care options for their loved ones, just learning the history of a facility can be challenging. Kaiser Health News reporter Janelle Alicia says there are no federal requirements to report suicides in long-term care, and most states either don't track these numbers or wouldn't divulge them.
You would think that somebody would be watching. And what we found is it is very difficult to tell which long-term care centers have had suicides, how your loved one, whether your loved one is in a place where that might have occurred.
She recommends that families ask what suicide prevention and mental health protocols are in place. But she cautions that the work being done in Wenatchee is one of the only programs she was able to find across the country. For their part, Julie Rickard and Jane Davis say we need to do better as a country of valuing care for the elderly and to reduce stigma around depression and suicide.
One thing that people don't recognize is that worldwide, men and women, as they get older, are at greater and greater risk for suicide. I think it's important and helpful to know that there are just a few things that we associate with suicide in older adulthood that really can be fixed. And when we change those things, when we recognize them and then intervene, that trajectory towards suicide actually can be altered and lives can be saved. The things that pop out and that place older adults at risk are first, depression. And by that I mean clinical depression. Older person with clinical depression typically is going to be sad. They're going to have lost interest in things that commonly interest them. They might be anxious, they might have trouble sleeping, they might have lost their appetite, feel a lot of somatic symptoms, as we call them, things like pain and stomach upset and that kind of thing. The second D is debility. It's the idea that even though older people ordinarily almost have one or more chronic illnesses, when that illness or illnesses mount up, when they begin to have an impact on the person's functioning, their ability to maintain independence, and in particular has impacts on things that are personally meaningful. The third D, as I think about it, is disconnectedness. We know that's very important for older people to maintain social contacts and social connections. And so if an older person is withdrawing from or is required to withdraw from social interactions because of physical illness and functional impairment, that disability, or because they're depressed and it's hard to interact with other people, that's an additional risk. The fourth D I think of as access to deadly means. Over 3/4 of older men who take their own lives do so with a firearm. And of older people over the age of 65 who die of a firearm injury each year, 92% are suicides. So having a firearm in the home, we know, of an older person who has these other Ds going on in their life is at significantly increased risk. Older adulthood is not a time when it's normal to feel depressed. It's not a time when it's normal to feel as if your life has no meaning. And if those things are coming across, that should send up a red flag and indicate a time for some additional evaluation, because these are things that can be changed.
Welcome back. I hope you really enjoyed watching the video with us. There's certainly a lot of important information in that. I really, it really speaks to all of us, thinking about this pandemic and how lonely everyone has felt and how disconnected and, and how much we do need to respect everyone and to realize that everybody does have value. So this is a really important topic. I'm so glad Kevin was willing to film this video for us. My name's Kathy Castle. I'm the Executive Director of Channel Marker. I work for a community-based behavioral health organization. Just want to thank our sponsors once again, Maryland Behavioral Health Administration, Midshire Behavioral Health, Anne Arundel County Department of Health, Anne Arundel Mental Health Agency, and Channel Marker. And just a quick reminder, you can use the chat and the Q&A functions here in the webinar, and our panelists will continue to monitor those for you. And I'm very excited because I get to introduce Kevin Hines. I know he's getting ready to pop up in a minute. Of course, you saw him on this video, so he basically introduced himself, but I have the pleasure of being able to call this man my friend. He's an amazing guy. He's got a great story, as you saw. And he's devoted literally his entire life to spreading his message, his passionate message of hope, healing, recovery. He speaks literally all over the country and the world. And we are just so thankful for Kevin's partnership in doing these videos and being willing to be with us tonight, because he is one busy individual. And, he always makes time for people who need him. And next, I'm going to ask for Katrina. Katrina, there she is. She works for Midshire Behavioral Health as well, and she is the behavioral health coordinator for aging. And she's going to have she's going to introduce our next panelist for us. Thanks, Katrina.
Absolutely, yes, thank you. As mentioned, yes, I'm Katrina Oshitelu, and I am grateful for the opportunity to get to introduce one of our panelists tonight, which is Kim Burton. Kim, she's been an advocate and an educator on late life behavioral health issues for more than 30 years. And particularly in 2001, Kim, she joined the Mental Health Association of Maryland, where she served as the director of adult programs for 20 years. And in that capacity, Kim provided hundreds of public and professional presentations and developed curriculum that was used statewide for workforce development and training in the areas of late life mental health, substance use disorders, suicide, cognitive impairment, person-centered care, caregiver support, and other important topics. Kim has also even authored Maryland's premier mental health and aging guidebook titled Mental Health in Later Life, a guidebook for older Marylanders and the people who care for them. And she developed Maryland's first website dedicated to late life behavioral health education and resource information, which is mdaging.org, mdaging.org. So before Kim left Mental Health Association of Maryland, which was just this past year in 2020, Kim developed curriculum for the education of peer support workers to provide geriatric behavioral health information and attract a larger workforce to serve older Marylanders in need of peer support. Kim's willingness to share her personal experiences with mental illness, addiction, and recovery, combined with decades of continued education and work experience, make her a compelling messenger of none other than hope. So currently, Kim, she works independently as a consultant, educator, and an advocate. She also volunteers her time in the development of Baltimore Neighbors Network, which is a friendly call and support program for older residents of Baltimore City. And in addition to that, of course, there's so much more I could share about Kim's background, but on a more personal note, I will say that very quickly that I greatly appreciated really getting to know just what Kim has to offer when I attended a training recently where she did a presentation titled More Than Sad, Suicide Risk in Older Adults. And I greatly appreciated her so much in what she brought. Kim is one of those people who I would say she gets it. And when I say someone gets it, that's a big deal for me. And getting it doesn't mean she knows everything, but what it means is the it factor that she has. It goes beyond what anyone could ever teach someone. It goes beyond what a training could ever give you. It has to do with how she's wired internally. The compassion and the wisdom that she brings exceeds any knowledge you can get from the textbook. So I thank her for that opportunity to have learned from her so greatly during that training. So thank you, Kim, for giving a commitment of yes to share tonight on such a topic. And I'm going to pass the baton to you, Kevin. Thank you.
Kim and Kevin. I know we have a couple questions that are popping up in the chat. There's Kim. Hey, Kim.
Thank you, Katrina. You made me want to cry.
Well, I meant those words truly. I don't know you extremely personally, but I can tell who you are, and I appreciate you.
Kim has a pretty impressive bio with lots of experience. It was good for me to just get her to know her here recently. Oh, Kevin's having some video tech problems. Can anybody on our panel team open up his video? Bear with us for a minute, everybody. Every now and then, the technology likes to challenge us here, but he is with us. There he is. Kevin, you just want to make a grand entrance. Right?
Well, that was a very kind and wonderful introduction for Kim. I couldn't have said it any better. Kim, your accomplishments are amazing, but more importantly than your accomplishments, your efforts to help people inspire me and people, I think, all around the country, if not the world. Your work and your tireless work in this field, in these fields, is awe-inspiring. So thank you so much. Kim, could we start with you telling us about your life experience, not what we hear in the bio, but really about your life experience and your work in the field and what it's meant to you over all these years?
Thank you for that question, Kevin. I think what I want to say most prominently is that my work in nursing homes back in the 80s exposed me to a depth of despair of humans that I had not seen before. And because of my exposure to wonderful older adults with fantastic stories and incredible resilience, but they were in circumstances that would make anybody really struggle. I felt that there was not the proper attention given to behavioral health needs. I'm using the term behavioral health to include, all kinds of mental health, cognitive impairment, substance use disorders, etc. And there was even a reluctance on behalf of the administration to talk about it and want to work on mental health issues. And I think that was illustrated in the video that we just saw. So that inspired me to go back to school and take a certificate program on geriatric mental health. And I'm sad to say that it's been several decades and these circumstances still exist. And we have a workforce actually smaller than it was back in those days in terms of geriatric behavioral health providers.
So we have the same situation that's not been solved, just like global suicide in general, but we have a less of a workforce dedicated to these to older adults and their struggles, which means that less people are going into those fields, which is also equally devastating. Can you tell us a story of a positive outcome of working with I hate to call them patients and consumers because I hate those terms. I really like the term citizen of hope because we're all trying to find that hope, that light at the end of the tunnel, but sometimes we just feel like we can't reach it. So what's an experience you've had with a citizen of hope in one of the places you worked that was a positive experience that ended on a good note?
There were many, many, many of those. I feel like the positive experience happened every time I had a heart-to-heart engaging talk with an older person who was feeling distressed, alone, disempowered, and listening to them and listening to how they feel and not trying to make them feel better, but to understand and validate their feelings, but also to impart hope. And just in sharing my experience too with them, that something happens where actually laughter begins and people start to feel more relaxed. And that really, I think, is about connection. And that happened many, many, many times when I went in and sat with people in their rooms at nursing homes and assisted livings.
So you're saying, I think, that it's not about necessarily fixing the problem. Sometimes it's just about feeling it. And that's what my wife and I do. Every night we get together and she says to me, Kevin, when she's telling me a problem she's going through, she says, I will say, I'll stop her and I'll say, Margaret, is this a fix it or a feel it? And she'll say, I don't need you to fix anything. I just need you to be there for me in this moment. And I think that that's sometimes what we've forgotten to do for our older population is, and the older adults in our lives, is be there for them in that moment and just feel it. Just exist with them in that time spot. And it's not like we have to solve their problem, because oftentimes these are problems we can't solve. If someone is going blind or they're going deaf, we don't have power over that problem. And if someone is losing the capacity to walk or jog, we don't have the power to solve that problem. So I think oftentimes with older individuals, we must just feel it and be there for them in that moment. I think you expressed that perfectly.
We need, Kevin, more people to be there and to feel it. And one of the things I'm excited about that Maryland is investing more in is peer support. So having older adults be with older adults to share their experience, strength, and hope, that is the feeling and the connection that you're talking about. But there is a huge fix-it need, because our systems of health and human services, we've never seen so many people reach such an old age. This is the first time this has ever happened historically. So we don't have systems that are already built for this population like we do for children. And we need to make it a priority.
We absolutely need to make it a priority. And I want to take a moment here to address two of the comments in the comment section. The first comment is good diet, ? Elderly people who live by themselves often have a really hard time to eat a healthy diet. Any suggestions? I'd like to ask you about that, but just before we do that, there's something that we could do for our older population, certainly in their nursing homes. The nursing home could mandate healthier eating practices, and they could look into inflammatory versus non-inflammatory foods and try to feed more non-inflammatory foods to their citizens of hope. That's one way of looking at it. What would you say to any suggestions of helping people who are living by themselves eat a more healthy diet?
I would say that Maryland is lucky to have many area agencies on aging. And actually the one on the Eastern Shore is one of the best probably in the United States. But to reach out and contact them, because they are aware of programs that bring people together. They're actually called Eating Together programs because of the socialization that it prompts. It just helps people to feel better, but they also fit nutrition in there. And there's also nutritionists available to talk with older adults. So Maryland Access Point is the name of the Aging and Disability Resource Center in Maryland. And Maryland Access Point is the group to call, or you can go online and find them to really find answers to all questions and to try to meet any needs. Kevin, you talked about diet in the video, and that was important. And I remember you also were talking about exercise. And one of the things that came up in the chat was somebody saying, hey, you're talking to old guys who have chronic pain and can't do vigorous exercise. And I really wanted to tell that person that we need to not give up when we have pain or disability. And that maybe it's not going to be vigorous exercise, but you have to know that the brain must have blood flow. It must have oxygen. Yeah. And so that may not be a run up and down the stairs, but that might just be, getting your body to move. And you can also learn about exercise programs that target older adults through Maryland Access Point and those area agencies on aging.
Absolutely. So important and so crucial to mention. I want to take time to look at this comment from Delaney Madden. I was a geriatric nurse aide, and after my shifts, I would sit with residents who were considered troubled or cranky, just to listen to them, and seeing their moods change just in talking with them was amazing! ! Thank you so much for what you do, Kim, because it is beautiful. I think that's an important comment just to highlight there. Really crucial.
And can I say that label cranky gets me, because we put so many labels onto people who are having normal experiences under abnormal conditions.
Right. Fair enough. I think that's important to note. And there's a language issue there that we can transition into and use different words. What words would you use to describe someone who is otherwise labeled as cranky? How would you express it that was a sensitive way?
It might depend on the words that they use when they're talking to me, but I could say to them that it sounds like you feel tired often. It sounds like the pain makes you feel bad. I mean, just kind of isolate those kinds of circumstances that they are living with that are contributing to how they feel, and how they feel is contributing to their behavior. And so what the person had said in the chat, that time of just sitting down and connecting with them, that's what they need more than a medication oftentimes.
And I think making them their messaging to you, making it more human and more kind and compassionate and empathetic to what they're going through is key. But just so nice of that individual to thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Mary Chaput writes, socialization is part of good nutrition. So when folks are at home bound and are lonely, healthy eating may not be a concern for them. That's a very interesting point. Thank you, Mary, for that piece of information. Kim, what would you say was the highlight, or have you had a highlight in your career you'd like to describe for us? Something that really, some specific experience that really opened your eyes to the positive work you were doing.
I wish I could point to one thing. The highlight is my 20 years of working at the Mental Health Association of Maryland and learning every day. And literally, there's always more to learn about this. Yeah, I don't think I could point to any one thing. That's fine. I'm glad it's the 20 years, because you put in the effort and you've been there doing the work for 20 years, and that's 20 years of a dedicated life to a great cause. And they say that people who volunteer for a cause outside of themselves are 63% more mentally healthy than those who do not. So volunteering for a cause is significantly beneficial to your mental well-being. So I'm sure you're feeling good these days. I certainly hope you are. Kim, is there anything specifically about the video you watched that we created that you either found helpful or a good resource for people, or even something you saw in the video that could have been done even better? It was a great video. Thank you for making that. There is a piece of information that I think would astound most people that I would have loved to see on the video, and so I'm glad you brought this up. When you look at people in the age range of 15 to 24, if you have 100 people within that age range attempt suicide, there's an average of 1 death. Okay, so 1 death for 100 attempts. For older adults, it's 1 death for every 4 attempts. Oh, wow. For every 4. Wow. And there are multiple reasons having to do with the survivability when you're an older adult, but there's a less likely chance that people are going to be found. But primarily, older adults they're very intentional about suicide, and they are less likely to talk about a plan. And that means that we need to be listening more carefully, watching more carefully, and following up when we hear them talk about death. And I want to say, talk about death is perfectly normal when you're an older adult and you're getting mail from funeral homes on a regular basis. They should be talking about death, but it's how they talk about death. And so listening for the expression that they would have about feeling like they're a burden, feelings of guilt, just statements that they don't see that there's any reason for them to be alive. So a lack of purpose and those kinds of things. It's older adults, we have to be investigators a little bit more because we may not see into their lives the way we can see into the lives of younger people. Wow, thank you, Kim, for that answer. That was really important, and really important to round out this half an hour with. But I would say before we go, I want to ask you a couple more questions, or rather, I want to bring up a couple of points. It was Harold Wobbler, a World War II veteran,
who was the first recorded to die off the Golden Gate Bridge. And he brought his World War II boots to the Golden Gate with a note that said, "This is as far as I go." And there's some information saying that Harold was dealing with something close to PTSD and that he was really struggling, and he'd seen some very difficult times in the war. And, I think that the point I'm trying to make is that we need to, like you said, be investigators in our older population's lives. We need to talk to them. We need to call them on a regular basis. We need to reach out to them on a regular basis. We need to teach them how to do video conference calls. My wife does it with her grandma all the time. Video chats on Skype. She can't figure out the iPhone, but she can figure out Skype. And she gets her on there and they talk for hours. And her grandma is from the Philippines, and they speak in their native Visayan. And they have a wonderful time, and they do this every single night, and you can see her light up, and it's the highlight of her evening, having this call from Margaret. And it's just you can see how much of a blessing and a gift it is. And on those rare days that we get so busy and we don't call Lola, we get that phone call. Why haven't you called me? Do you not want to talk to me anymore? So they're very close. They love each other dearly, and that connection. Not that Lola has any mental health crises, because she doesn't exhibit any of them, but she's just very thankful that connection is there, and I think it's very much appreciated. So I think that we can learn from this to go and what if there was that person that could have been there like that for Harold Wobbler before he passed on? That person to reach out and say, "I've got your back. I'm here for you. You can tell me anything. And I'm always going to be reaching out to you, even if you don't reach out to me."
Thank you for telling that story, because that gentleman was a hero and certainly a strong person. And older adults don't become weak. They are challenged. They are challenged in ways that we can't possibly anticipate. Yeah. But what we can anticipate are that there are going to be changes and challenges. And we know that there are going to be changes to health, and there's going to be changes to functionality. There's going to be changes to senses. So we should be, number one, preparing to fill in those gaps when somebody has a loss like that. Number two, be doing a lot of prevention education and helping people understand loss and grief, and to develop coping skills and resiliency skills, so that when they hit these bumps that are inevitable, right, they have tools and they don't give up.
Absolutely. So crucial. Another interesting story I want to share with you is the story of Dr. Jerry Motto. And Dr. Jerry Motto was a psychiatrist in the 1970s and onward. And he was a psychiatrist of the VA system. He was also a man who fought for the raising of the net at the Golden Gate Bridge for 30 years. He was the original fighter for the net, if you will. And he developed these caring letters for patients, old and younger, who would leave the VA system and leave psych wards. And they did a study of 50% of the population that they gave these caring letters to after they got out of the hospital from suicidal ideation and attempts. The 50% of people that got the caring letters that said, "Hey, we care about you. We're wondering how you're going. We're wondering, if you're feeling any better. If not, come and see us. And if there's anything we can do to help you feel better and get more mentally stable, we're here for you. We got your back." The other 50% of the study didn't get the caring letters, and sadly, there was a much more increasing level of recidivism into the psych ward, and there was a much more increasing level of suicide attempt. So they started to give that was just to understand the difference. They started to give the letters to everyone who got admitted and then was let back out into the community. What that has turned into today is the idea that human beings and families and friend groups and colleagues and connected people can create caring letters for their loved one or their people they care about that they think are suicidal or they think are struggling mentally of any age. And these letters are usually comprised of about 5 things. And these are like sentences. Think of these in sentence form. A sentence on complete compassion to what they're going through. A sentence on a complete lack of judgment of what they're dealing with. A sentence on total empathy and why they're empathizing with them in their struggle. A sentence on, so let's see, compassion, empathy, lack of judgment, unconditional love of them if you're in that position, and then the signs, symptoms, and triggers that you're worried about that they're going through. And when this letter would come from 3 to 5 people in their peer personal network, what that did for people was it showed them how valuable they were. It showed them, instead of telling someone through their ear, which can go in one ear and out the other, you showed them how valuable they were, and they appreciated that, and some of them chose life. And it's amazing how they're working today. But something out of Canada happened that was inspired by Jerry Motto was the caring packages that go along with the caring letters. And these were mailed to people, so they were really formal, it was really official. Handwritten notes, mailed to someone through the mail, care packages of all their favorite things, favorite foods, favorite candies, favorite whatever. And these care packages and these caring letters have a tremendous impact on the well-being of people's lives because they feel loved. And feeling loved and connected can simply be what keeps us here. The woman in the video said it, she said, if I don't have connection, why? Why? So we have to recognize that and be aware of that. We have did you want to say anything about that, Kim?
No, you said it great. Thank you.
Kevin, can I ask Kim one thing? Kim,
Sure.
you and I had talked at another time about about caregivers and some of the feelings they're having dealing with maybe their older parents, whatever. And I was sharing with Kim that I was talking with a friend one day, and my friend had a mom that was starting to experience some dementia, and she said to me, the one thing she had to really learn herself as a caregiver is to try not to become frustrated, and at the same time deal with her own loss of her mother's, cognitive functioning, and to remind herself every time it's just as easy to repeat herself the question that she's already, answered for her mom than to say, Mom, why are you asking me that? I already told you, which then makes her mom feel bad. So she's like, so it's the same amount of energy, same amount of time, just repeat the question or the answer. Anyway, Kim, I don't know if you have anything to say about the caregiver piece.
I'm glad you brought the caregivers up because as you saw actually in the video with the daughter whose father jumped from his room in the nursing home, our loved ones, despite their age, we care so much. And the majority of people that are assisting older adults are family members. And family members are distressed by the stress that their older loved one is feeling. I've been encouraged not to say that stress can cause abuse, but I will tell you that elder abuse is on the rise, and that the majority of people who abuse the older adult are a family member. And we have a lot to do to help the mental health of family members who are caregivers. I'm glad Mary Chappett's on right now. She works with the caregiver program. And as I had talked about Maryland Access Point and the area agencies on aging, being a resource, they're a fantastic resource for caregivers as well. And we have good caregiver support programs throughout Maryland.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Kathy, for that very important question. We have Tamika Smith, who wrote in and said, I have attended each presentation thus far, and I want to say thank you. Truly, all panelists have been great. So thank you to all the panelists we've had thus far in these pieces, these videos.
I think Dana has some questions, right?
We do. Yeah. Kevin and Kim, thank you both so much for keeping such a sharp eye on the chat box, but we did have 2 more questions that were actually in the Q&A. The first question, Kevin, this refers back to you talking about the importance of self-advocacy. And so this person says, according to the Americans with Disabilities Act, a person can choose to disclose their disability at any time to their employer. I have experienced accusations about my mental well-being at work. I was then told the information was inappropriate and should not be talked about in the workplace. I too am a suicide survivor and am diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I ended up leaving this position because how I was treated. How would you suggest for me and others like me to be comfortable with self-advocacy after being shut down like that?
You know, I have a very concrete answer for that because I've actually been through that. I was out of work for some time in my, well, after I jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge at 19, up until my mid-20s, I was out of work and on Social Security disability. Part of it was because of my initial back injury, but after that was because of my mental status. And in trying to get back to work, I had a really hard time finding an employer who I would always disclose my mental struggles, because I didn't want them to come up later if I did struggle, and I didn't want them to fire me. I wanted them to know upfront so that I could work around it. And in case I needed to get mental health help and care, or in case I needed to go back into the psych ward, I wasn't terminated. So I made the educated decision to tell all of my would-be or potential employers that this was what I'm struggling with, but that I'm a good employee, I'm diligent, hardworking, show up on time or early, stay late, and I'm really going to be focused on this job. But in the off chance that I have a mental relapse, I want you to be aware that that's a possibility ahead of time. I had many people turn me away, and they didn't have to say it was because of that. It was crystal clear. And then I got a job, funnily enough, at the 24-Hour Fitness Kids Club, where I got to be the kids club attendant to often 24 kids at a time of all ages, ranging from 12 months to 12 years of age. It was pandemonium. But my parents were foster parents, and we had 27 kids of all ages coming in and out of my house since I was a kid. I was changing diapers at the age of 6, literally. So, you know, that experience allowed me to get the job. The administrative staff knew of my mental health crisis before. They knew of my psych ward stays. They knew of my attempts. And I felt that, you know, I realized that all the jobs that turned me down weren't worth my time. As difficult as that experience was, as rejected as I felt for something I had no control over, I realized that if I just be honest every time with my potential or would-be employers, something's going to come around, something's going to work out, and I'm going to find someone with a level of empathy that's going to help me. And I did.
Thank you. There's one final question, and this question is from Kim. How do you encourage a suicidal person to change their approach to life with the suggestions offered tonight when they choose not to help themselves? What if they do not do the work to be well?
That is such a difficult question. And I'm going through this with a family member right now, because unfortunately, the disease of depression has symptoms that are polar opposite to what one needs for self-care. I heard in that question how to change somebody. I can't remember how it was phrased, but instead of trying to push somebody into something, I would just recommend talking and listening and not giving up and offering hope. But also, there needs to be some problem solving, usually with older adults, because they're often in this place of despair because of things that have changed and circumstances that they need to repair. And oftentimes they feel that they can't. When my grandmother was in her elderly years she lost her vision, and she was an artist, and she didn't want to live anymore. And I wish that I could be the person I am now and go all the way back there, because there's so many other ways she can be involved in art. So trying to find those places that make life meaningful, and just incrementally, make sure that person's eating healthy, getting enough water, getting exercise. And as the brain starts to get a little bit better, things might start to change. But it's imperative that that person be talking with their doctor about it, because there's also a lot of things that can be going wrong that aren't mental health related. It could be a thyroid disorder. It could be a bunch of things, vitamin D. So I would encourage that first.
Thank you, Kim, for your incredible insight and the resources you provided on this panel. And thank you to the Kim that asked that question. And thank you to all the questions that came in and all the comments that came in. And thank you, of course, to Kathy, to Bridget Keeley, Sandy O'Neill, Dana, and to everyone involved. Really appreciate everyone's time here tonight. Thank you to Katie and everyone else involved. But I just want to say I am grateful for all of you putting this all together so we can have this conversation.
Thank you, Kevin. And Kevin and Kim, there was one final question, and I think it's kind of important. It just came in. Is it okay if I ask one more question?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. Have we started to discuss the suicide rates within the LGBTQ aging population?
The answer is yes, we've started to, and we are very lucky through Chase Brexton here in Maryland to have a pretty strong group of people who are working on LGBTQ older adult issues. And there are actually some really wonderful strategies and trainings specific to that topic.
Thank you. So that concludes all of the questions from the Q&A. Thank you for sticking around and answering. So Kathy, I'll turn it over to you.
I did notice a couple other comments. I don't know that they're necessarily questions. Kevin, somebody had commented about the importance of faith. Certainly, I believe you mentioned it in this video, and how, faith is very healing for lots of people. And also another comment was about just COVID and isolation, and how so many people, not just elderly, have lost the battle to COVID while they've been in the hospital and unable to have human connection, and just how important it is. I know personally, I experienced that. I had a mother who was close to death in the hospital with COVID, and it took a lot of advocacy on my part to be able to, get into the hospital. Obviously, we know why people aren't allowed in, but there's a careful balance there that you really have to advocate to be able to see your loved ones. I know that's probably happened in nursing homes so many times, Kim. So just
can I interrupt? Because that's a really important piece to talk about, the spirituality and the faith. It made me think that we haven't really talked about protective factors. And some of the protective factors include cultural and religious beliefs for preserving life. Another protective factor, I think I mentioned this, is resiliency and coping and problem-solving skills. Easy access to support, strong connections, meaningful engagements, meaningful activities. All of these are things that are protective. So thanks for bringing that up to the person who wrote that.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Kim. And that's right, protective factors are quite important to be discussed here. And another one of the most greatest protective factors for suicide amongst any population is gratitude inside painful moments. And it's hard to have gratitude when you're struggling, but if you can harness it, you can find the ability to be more resilient. And I think that I'm just appreciative for everyone here tonight. I'm grateful for all of you.
We're grateful for you, Kevin.
Kim and Kevin, thank you both. Every time we have one of these videos, it's just, I want to go volunteer somewhere and help whatever topic we're talking about. You guys are amazing. You do great work. Kevin, we love you. And if you liked what you saw tonight, we still have a few more episodes coming up with our good friend Kevin Hines. And our next one is going to be one that's just general in nature to everybody and anybody. think we're going to talk a little bit about the pandemic and working from home within that segment as well. But join us, come back for any of them. Kevin is here with us, given his time, and we're glad to help in any way. So that one is April 22nd. Am I right on that?
April 22nd, yes.
April
General
22nd.
community, yeah.
And you can sign up. And we have a few more. One's going to be toward veterans, and another one is going to be for men. And what am I missing?
Veterans and impacted families.
Yes,
Yep.
impacted families of suicide. So they're all going to be good. So come back and visit us. And I think that concludes, right?
Thank you, everybody.